All right. Mike's good. But we don't know what happened. The YouTube didn't work and we had to start a new one. Okay. Last week we were cut off about halfway through the lesson, but we went ahead and recorded it here in the studio as we always do. So we will try to upload that video later, and get rid of the one that's only halfway through the teaching. But we left off at vaYiqra 19 and was it 34? Sorry. So the translation last week was, "You shall treat a proselyte that dwells among you as if he or she is a native from your people, and you will love them, for you were proselyte." Uh, so this week we begin very, very literal translation of the Hebrew text into English. Not you shall make them injustice in. Okay. So we start off with the negative article, which is why we say thou shalt not or whatever. And then the next word is ta'asu. You hear asa. Literally, that would be you shall make they. Properly, it's to labor, to work about, anything to make, to produce by labor, to manufacture, to fabricate. Uh, it's do. We would say the word do. You will not do. And then it says avel, injustice, wickedness, depravity, iniquity, as of a judge, of a merchant, to act wickedly, to commit iniquity, which most people have no idea what they mean by iniquity. Uh, it's kind of the English word for injustice. You could apply that depending on, let's do this to the judicial world. What's going to kind of throw us into politics if I don't watch myself, and I'm not interested in that. But if you have a judge who sits on a bench, and let's say that judge has a family member who maybe gets a speeding ticket, maybe he was going 80 miles an hour through a 25-mile-an-hour school zone, and he goes to that judge, and that judge says, "Oh, hey, it's nephew Charlie," and then nephew Charlie gets his case dismissed. That's injustice because he doesn't do that for everybody. Now, if you do it for everybody, that could still be injustice, but I don't really want to get into a long legal discussion as to why, but I think you guys could see why. I mean, justice is supposed to be the same. And we've already talked about how judges are not supposed to show favoritism to somebody because they're poor. And we see that in all throughout the world where some poor person claims that they were harmed by some giant corporation in some way. And the truth is they weren't. There's no real harm there. And then the jury will go ahead and say, well, he's poor and they're rich, so let's just give him $1 million or something like that. That's injustice, and that's one of the things that's being said. You should not do something like that. If you have, uh, and this is not just about judges here. This can be attorneys piling on. That's one of the terms you hear a lot these days, because you have a law. There's a guy somewhere overseas. I don't know his name. I don't know who he is. I don't know what he does. He's popular on the interweb. I know that. apparently has, lots of followers and stuff like that. And he's in a country. Oh, no, no. I think I'm mixing up two stories here. Let me think here a second. No, this was a guy. The story I'm thinking of, the guy was doing some drug running. It was like he was delivering them from one part of the United States down to Mexico or something like that. And he fled the country, which then he went to this other country. So America was trying to extradite him from the country he was in back to America. And they had charged him with two different charges that in that country was actually, they didn't allow that because they were both essentially the same charge. So if you're, say you're, and I know this doesn't have anything to do with that particular case, but let's say you're charged with obstruction, and then you're charged with conspiracy to commit obstruction. Well, see, in America, we see that as two different things. And over in whatever that country was, I don't remember which, but they saw that as piling on. That's just, you're charging somebody essentially with the same charge more than once. And that country would not allow America to do that and get their extradition. Because we have these treaties with these other countries, and when they have that person, they have the right to tell us you can't do that. And we go by that because it's a treaty. We agree to that, uh, to those treaties, and so we don't double charge those people, because we want them to treat our people the same. Uh, when someone comes from that country over to here, we may see something that they do is quite unjust, or maybe that we think that their penalty for that crime is way uh, too harsh. Because there's several countries out there that just being gay is a death sentence. If you're convicted of being gay, that's a death sentence. So let's say someone fled from that country over here to ours, and they wanted to get that person back, we would say you cannot charge this, you cannot uh, give the death penalty to this person. We can even go as far as to say, in fact, you can't give him more than, say, a year. I don't know that that one would fly, but we have that right. Or we can just say, no, we're just going to let him stay here. So those countries tend to agree with us because they want the same type of thing. Um, why was I going down that? So I'm talking about, say, district attorneys who, or the office anyway, they go in there and they do that piling on. Well, if it really is the same thing, where the conspiracy to commit and the being convicted of doing it, I think I agree with that. I think that's the same thing, and I don't think there's any reason to have to charge somebody essentially with the same crime just because you've got some other way to put some other way to describe that crime. That's injustice. So that your attorneys can do something like that. And then sometimes you see an attorney who will just absolutely sell out their client. And that happens everywhere, happens in America, happens in other countries, where a attorney, somebody will hire an attorney to represent them. And that attorney uh, is he, say, scared of the judge. Maybe he won't get he's trying to work his way up the ladder in the judicial system, and he doesn't want the judge to get mad at him, so he just sells a guy out. That's injustice, and it all falls under this same thing. Everything is supposed to be balanced, as we're going to find out. So then you have avel, which is the word that we've been talking about, and that's followed by ba mishpat. So it's, you're not supposed to practice injustice when dealing out your judgment, right? So it tends to be a little bit thought of a little bit more toward a judge because they're the ones that deal out the justice, right? But that comes from all the way down to a police officer. He pulls you over. you were going to, 20 miles too quick or whatever, and the next thing you know, that police officer is charging you, saying that you resisted arrest and you didn't follow the instructions of the police officer and all that kind of stuff. And of course, if all of those things are true, that's one thing. But if it's just a police officer who doesn't like somebody, maybe it's because of the color of their skin. Maybe it's because that person did him wrong. Maybe that person got the girl and he didn't. You know what I'm saying? If they, so it can happen at just all levels of the justice system. And this is very specific to the justice system. So the police officer should not do that. The district attorney who takes in the case should not do that. When the person is put in jail, he should not be, he or she should not be treated badly. They are responsible for taking care of these people because it would be unjust not to, right? So it can be the jailing system itself, all the way up to the Supreme Court deciding on a political matter, which is why the Supreme Court tries very hard to stay out of things like that. Sometimes they can't get around it, but they try very hard to stay out of political issues. And then there are times when they are we've had, Supreme Court justices who were more than happy to do something like that, where they step across the line and do things that they shouldn't do. And again, that happens in every country, that we're not the only people who do that. Hopefully that doesn't happen a lot. I couldn't tell you if it's out of control or in control, nor could you tell me. We don't have those statistics. We don't know. We just think that because it happened to 2 or 3 of the people that we know, that this is at epidemic levels. Well, we don't actually know that. So if you believe that, maybe you ought to, find the information and give us the statistics, and then we can all actually say that we know. But right now, I don't think we can actually say that. Anyway, but that would be injustice and judgment at any of those levels. Then it says, Bamidah, so that's measurement. It's used of length, like you use a tape measure to measure the length. So you get the idea of the length of something. It's even used tribute of offerings that are given. Let me see if I can figure out how to tell you how we get to that idea. Let's see. Jusinius is saying that this word actually comes from the Chaldean language, which is not very likely. I don't think he's right, but let's say he is. It's the measure of offering that you give, because God does not just require 10% of our income. That's not where it starts and stops. That's only one of the offerings that we're supposed to give according to the Bible. And so some of those, like if you're a farmer, you're supposed to leave the corners of your field, part of it left for the poor. That's a measure. It's a measurement, a measure of your field that is left to the poor. And it's saying, don't be stingy about something like that. It is up to you how much you give or don't give. And that's not a heaven or hell issue. You're not going to go to hell because you only gave 10%, your neighbor gave 15%. That is not how that works. But if you're just being stingy, and you're saying, well, there's at least two stalks of corn left at each corner, your measure in your gift is an unjust measure to God. He's given you this field that's completely full of food, and you were stingy with your gift. So that's how they get there with this same word. But this is the measure, and it's more often going to be of what's that thing called? The balance thing where you got the scale. It's called a scale. You guys have seen those. It's got the stick that sticks up in the middle, little stand for it to stick into, so it'll stand up. And then it's got the little stick that goes out this way, and it has little chains that come down. You got these flat kind of, or maybe even cups, so that you put a weight that, say, is 1 ounce, and somebody comes in with some gold and they put it over here, and you put 1 ounce. Okay, well, that's not balancing yet. So then you put a few more in there and it's starting to come up. You put a few more because you don't want it to go this way because now you're losing money, but you got to get that in that balance. And because the next word is ba mishkal. I think I forgot to say that. So this is the measurement in the weight. That's that word for weight. U va meshura, and the measure of liquids. So you're talking about a book that is using a very ancient system, but that doesn't mean it stops when we find a new way to do it. If the American dollar is literally worth $1, you should get $1 worth of goods. If the American dollar is worth 20 cents, which that's what inflation does, it takes the dollar and lowers the value of that dollar. That's why you have to give more dollars to buy something. So, for instance, we have many things that the price has come close to double, has doubled, has maybe gone past double. Some of it has tripled. Here's the problem with that. The American dollar is not at zero. It is not at minus zero. And so some of these people are giving unjust measures, the ones that have gone triple or more on their pricing. There's a problem here. Now, if it's gone triple or more because it's costing them, not only let's say the dollar is worth half of what it was worth before, where you would think, okay, this is 50%. But now, wait a minute, price of gas has gone up. The ability to get things shipped from another country to ours has become a big problem. That causes the price to go up because it's supply and demand. If there's very little supply and very big demand, that changes the cost even for the person who's selling it in their store. So sometimes just because they're charging 3 times or 4 times what it used to cost does not mean that they are price gouging. It means sometimes that they are just covering the actual cost to them. And, of course, they're supposed to put a little something on top of that so they can stay in business and you can have a nice little grocery store to go to every week. If they don't make any money, hello, you're not going to have a grocery store to go to. So you have to be okay with paying a little more. But by them just keeping the amount that they add on top of it, relatively low, then they can stay in business. You can have what you need, and that's even though on an actual scale that would be a little off. What you get in return balances that scale. So there's a lot of things. It's not just the idea of, okay, well, this weighs 5 ounces, this weighs 5 ounces, we're done. This is just the simplest way for us to learn this law. It applies to absolutely everything, not just people putting little things in a weight and a measure. Okay, and this is being said about justice. And you see this weight and balance thing used in, see them on the walls in courtrooms. You see actual weight thingies. What did you say that was called? Scale. You see actual scales sitting on someone's desk or, something like that. And particularly in law firms and in your courts and stuff like that. It's just kind of a little reminder of what justice is supposed to be. My video went off for a second there. But anyway, that's what we're talking about. So the translation's pretty straightforward. You shall not create injustice in your judgment of portions, weights, and liquid measures. So you can't just say that this is about portions of weights and liquid measures, because portions is one thing, weights and liquid measures are two other things. So all three of these things are what you cannot create injustice in. You can't separate they're not three ways of saying the same thing. They literally are, probably for the first time since we've been going through the law, three different things. And the reason why they're three different things is because of the words that are being used. These are legal words. So you can't drop the legal part out and just talk about weights and balances for exchanging money. That just doesn't work that way. But it's very rare that you see something like this. Usually when you see three different things, they're just three different ways of saying the same thing. This is not the case here. Okay, so let's go on to verse 36. The very literal translation here is balances righteous, stones righteous, ephah, which means dry measure, righteous, and hin, that's a liquid measure, righteous, he will be to you. I, Yahweh God, I, Yahweh your God, that make go me, and from land Mitzrayim. I made you leave the land of Israel, or the land of, the land of Israel, the land of Egypt. Okay, so we start off with Zedek. This is a very important word, and we ought to talk about this a little bit, get serious about what this word means. Zedek, they have, in a physical sense, straightness, righteousness of straight paths or straight ways, hence, in an ethical sense, rectitude, right, what is right, and just, what is so or ought to be so, of one doing what is right, acting rightly, to judge the right, in other words, to be just. From the image of balances, lost my place. The words are a little small. I meant to go get myself a new pair of glasses this week and totally forgot about that. Where was I? I can't find it. Acting rightly, right, balances, weights. Oh, and this is of sacrifices, in other words, such as are due, rightly offered, of right or just cause of anyone. So it just kind of covers the gamut, right? The biblical Hebrews ascribe to a just man, a man who lives according to the laws contained within the Torah, is what they mean by a just man. Benignity and liberality is ascribed to these kind of people. Temperance and sobriety in eating and in speaking. In other words, they're not fat like me. Okay, let's see. What else do they say? The love of truth is said of righteousness, that's the love of truth. The love of wisdom is said of righteousness. Empathy used of innocence from Torah rebellion, which of course is called sin. The biblical text only refers to the Torah observant as righteous. All others are, according to the biblical text, unrighteous. In order, I think, for someone to understand what righteousness really is to first understand what sin is and what sin is not. Once you have established that, you can understand what righteousness is and what righteousness is not. It's actually quite simple. If you're the kind of person who's constantly saying it's, now the word jumped out of my head, complicated, it's complicated, it's complicated. That's okay if you're talking about something like psychology, or, because the human brain is very complicated and it's difficult to understand, right? But if you're talking about the Bible and you're saying it's complicated, you're not doing it right at all. The Bible is written it's written simplistically. It's written for not for the simple of mind per se, but if you don't find the simplicity in your verse, you do not understand the verse. So let's make sin what it is and what it isn't very, very simple. There is a verse that I tell every Jew and every Christian they need to memorize, and you need to commit this to memory. If you're a Jew and you're constantly being told by these Christians you work with or whatever that you're going to hell, you're going to hell, you're going to hell because you don't believe Jesus, you need to learn this verse. It's from the New Testament. And if, on the other hand, you're a Christian and you're being told you're having, Jews treat you kind of the same way, but for a different reason, you need to learn this. Actually, everybody needs to learn this verse. It was written by a Jewish rabbi. For those of you who are Jewish, it was not written by a Christian. Christianity did not exist when the New Testament was written. So it's impossible for it to be a Christian book. Impossible. It was a Jewish book written by Jewish rabbis to other they were letters written by Jewish rabbis to other Jewish rabbis concerning matters of the Jewish religion. Christianity had absolutely nothing to do with the New Testament until hundreds of years later, 300 at least, because Constantine kind of had to win a war first before Christianity could even exist. And back then it was just Catholicism. It wasn't what we now think of as Christianity. That doesn't come along for 300 years after the New Testament letters. Well, we don't think the New Testament letters were written in the first century. Yeah, they were. There is no way that 300 years after the fact, Gentile people who had never been in Israel, did not speak the Hebrew language, did not know the Hebrew customs and culture, there is no way those people could have sat down and written those letters. Those letters are copies, yes, and they may not predate the 400s. Most of them don't, the fragments and whatnot. But there is no doubt that what is written in those fragments came from the first century. No doubt at all. If you don't know what I'm talking about, then you shouldn't be telling people anything about the Bible. That's as far as I'm concerned. You should know at least the basics. But anyway, 1 John chapter 3, verse 4. He who commits sin is in violation of the Torah. Now, if your King James says he who commits sin is in violation of the law, just mark out the word law and write Torah. It is a mistranslation. It was done on purpose because it's long after the time when they were trying to take all things Jewish out of the Bible. They did a very poor job of that. They changed all the names of almost all the names of the Jewish, almost all the Jewish names of people and towns and changed them. Like Bethlehem became Bethlehem. Yochanan became John. Levi somehow became Matthew. I still don't understand that one. Aharon became Luke. And so now one runs around saying Luke was a Gentile. No, he wasn't. He was a Jewish rabbi. He was a doctor of the law. He was not a medical physician. It is impossible. Medical physicians did not exist in the first century. End of story. He was not a doctor, medical doctor. So anyway, you take that word that is mistranslated, you put Torah, write it in right above it. He who commits sin is also in violation of the Torah, comma. That is not the end of the verse. It goes on and says, because sin is Torah rebellion. That's what that gives you what sin is and sin is not in a single sentence. Only a Jewish rabbi, a well-trained Jewish rabbi, could have broken down what sin is and is not in a single verse. That takes a Jewish rabbi. This guy was brilliant. And so you think about it. Sin is rebellion against the Torah. So you look at the Torah and you see what the law says. And if it says you're supposed to do something and you don't, no matter what any of the other translations say, because there are people who read the translations and say, Paul was against the law. No, he wasn't. They say Paul taught everybody to forsake the law. No, he didn't. That was clear. That was clarified in the letter of Acts when he went into town and they said, everybody's saying this about you, Paul. So to show everybody that this is not true about you, Paul, we want you to take these three men with a Nazirite vow to the temple and pay for their offerings and oversee all of that. And that will prove to everybody that, one, you do not teach that people should not follow the law, and two, that you do not teach that it's over with and done. So if you're reading a translation of Paul's work that's telling you otherwise, you're reading a bad translation. It's right there in the New Testament. Anywho, so you first need to know what the law says. It says you're supposed to wear a fringe on the four corners. Well, now it would help if you knew a few Hebrew idioms if you're going to really understand it, because the four corners means everything. They didn't have square clothing. The tali tote that were in use in the first century were not in use when this was written. They didn't have square clothing. So you didn't have four corners. It's an idiom. That just the fact that that stuff didn't exist ought to tell you it's an idiom. The idiom is everything that you wear, everything that touches your body is how it's put. So your blankets on your beds are supposed to have fringe, your towels are supposed to have fringe, and every piece of clothing that you have is supposed to have fringe. So if you're going Sunday through Friday not wearing fringe, you're in violation of the Torah. Everyone who commits sin is in violation of the Torah, because sin is Torah rebellion. And the not say you only have to wear your tzitzit on Shabat. No, it does not. It says your tzitzit has to be on everything that touches your skin. Right? So if it says to do that and you're not doing it, you are a sinner. Period. End of story. If it says don't eat pork, which it does, and you eat pork, oh, well, see, the New Testament says we don't have to eat pork. No, it doesn't. Translations of the Greek text say that, but the Greek text does not at all in any way, shape, or form. You have to be a lunatic to read that Greek and get that from what was said. A lunatic. Because the man who had the dreams about the unclean food and God saying, eat of the unclean food, Kepa's reaction was, oh, I've never done that. I'm not about to do it now. Eat of it. I'm not going to do it. Did he? No, he did not. And what? Oh, that wasn't the man who had the dreams conclusion. Why don't we listen to what that man concluded? Oh, God is no respecter of person. Had nothing to do with food at all. He never ate that food. He was never actually being told to break God's law. It was a parable in dream form. Let's listen to the guy who had the dream. Let's listen to his understanding of that dream. And that his understanding was, just because a Jew is from Italy doesn't mean that you can say, well, you're not a real Jew. I don't have to talk to you. I'm better than you. That's what the whole point was. Because where did he go after the dream? He went to another town that was, of course, in Israel, and spoke to who? Italian Jews. Italian Jews. Doesn't say that his interpreters spoke to these Italian Gentiles. No, it says he spoke to them. Do you think he spoke the Italian language? No, he did not. The sin is real simple. If the Torah says do it and you don't, you're living in sin. If the Torah says don't do it and you do, you're living in sin. That is the sum total of what sin is and what sin is not. So now that we understand the simplicity of what sin is and is not, let's talk about the simplicity of righteousness, what it is and what it is not. Those who live according to the law are the righteous, and those who do not are the unrighteous. It's that simple. There's nothing else to know. Whoa, weird stuff's happening on my monitor. All right, so what's our next word? Avnei. That's from that word Evan, my grandson's name. Stone, a stone of any kind, whether rough or polished, very large or very small, used of the foundation stone of a house, of vessels of stone, although that is rare. Metaphorically, of a hard heart. If he has a heart of stone, he has a hard heart. What else does it say? Used also of a bold and intrepid mind. Even hell is called hailstones, right? They would actually use Evan as part of the description of ice because it comes down looking like a stone. And if it's big enough, it can kill you if it hits you in the head, right? So we have this word for stones. And then what comes after that is righteous, zedek. We've just kind of finished that word up, right? So then it says ephat, or ephah is the root of that. And that's a dry measure, if you will. It's a measure of grain. 10 omers is a measure. The word is of Egyptian origin. I doubt that seriously, but it could be. I mean, there's this idea that the Jews stole some Egyptian words because you don't find them in any Hebrew that predates the Hebrew Bible. That's a dumb argument. What Hebrew text do you have that predates the... Anyway, I know there is a little bit out there, but I'm not even sure that the stuff I'm thinking of predates, but like the word Moshe, they say, see, that comes from the Egyptian word or the Egyptian language, and it means to be drawn out. Well, he drew the people out of Egypt. It's actually from the root, it's actually a form of the Hebrew word Mashiach. Mm-hmm. It's actually Hebrew origin. And we're going to find the same thing here. They could have borrowed these words, but just because a word sounds like another word in another language does not mean that that word was taken from that language. I've recently seen people say that the word amen, as they say it, it's actually amen or amen, depending on what dialect of Hebrew you speak. They're going around saying that word came from Germany, or that word came from Africa, and they're attaching all this. No, it didn't. It's a Hebrew word, and it's borrowed from all these other lands, and predominantly because that word is in every Bible in every language. That word is always written as amen. You pronounce it as amen in whatever language you're reading it in. So that's a borrowed word. And yeah, it's possible that the Hebrews borrowed some words, and maybe they did. I really doubt that seriously here. So anyway, it's of a measurement. It's generally and mostly, and maybe even completely in the biblical text, used of a dry measure, but that does not mean that it means dry measure. That bothers me. B'nai, somehow a word that means child and has no gender. B'nai has no gender. It's both masculine and feminine. That becomes son. So they're always saying son of God. Yeshua ben Elohim becomes Jesus was the bouncing baby boy of God. No, that is not what they mean by that. So anyway, you have now what word was I on when I said that? Had I gone back to Zedek yet, or was okay? I'm still on dry measure. Okay. Because of the dry measure. No, the word means measure because it's used only of a dry measure in the Bible, and I don't know if that's true or not. I'm assuming that that's probably the case. Does not mean that it means dry measure. It's another word for measure. Okay, it's not just dry. So then it says Zedek, which we've gone through that. It's either according to the law of God or it's not. If it's Zedek, it's according to the law of God. Then it says Vehim, and so they make that liquid measure. No, just another word for measure. Because it is probably, I'm just guessing here, only used a liquid measure in the Hebrew Bible, it then gets this idea gets thrust upon that word that it means liquid measure. No, for measure. So we have I rolled my mouse and lost something here. Oh, heen. We're on heen. It's not hen like a chicken. It's heen is how you spell the word or pronounce the word. Then it says Zedek. And the reason why I think it's so important for us all to understand that these are just words for measure is see, because the translators don't understand what's going on here, they think that, well, why would you say measure righteousness, measure righteousness? So they say it must be dry measure righteousness, liquid measure righteousness. See, that's the thinking here. Completely wrong. What happens in Hebrew when you say the same thing twice? Your measurement has to be righteous. Your measurement has to be righteous. That's how they would have read that back then. Are you following me? This is very, very important. That's, of course, this is yeah, it will be. And it says, Lamb to you. And then he says, Ani Yahweh Eloheinu. I am Yahweh your God. And then it goes on, Asher Hot Zeti Etchem Me'etz. No, it's like that can't be Me'etz. Me'eretz Mitzrayim. So I am Yahweh your God who made, we should look at that, I guess. Hot Zeti, I made you go out of Egypt. Just to go forth, it's used of germination because it comes forth out of the ground. To expand, and again, they say as a plant, there's a use of the going in and the coming out. But in Hebrew, going and coming is the same thing. If you go somewhere, you went from somewhere. You cannot go somewhere without leaving some other place. So if you go, you went. You can say, I am going to Israel, or you could say, I went from Syria. It's a little confusing if you say it with went in English, because if you don't know the typology and you don't know the destination, well, okay, you went from there, but where did you wind up? Where did you go? But the word go means both things. It's one word for both things. All right, so our translation, your balances will be righteous. Your stones, because I should have said a little more about that word, that which makes it righteous. I started down that road and I think I left a little something out that I should have said. Remember I talked about, you put these stones on here or these lead weights, and then you put your little gold over here and you're trying to get this thing in balance. And remember I said that sometimes they're not exactly even because somebody's got to make some money, right? So probably not with the exchange of money. I mean, they do that now. If you exchange money, somebody's getting a little bit of that. But remember I said that some people have doubled, tripled, and maybe even quadrupled their price, not because they're gouging you, but because of all the added costs involved in them selling you this good. If they've done that, okay, so the object itself cost them double what it used to cost. And then they had to pay for shipping. And then they had to maybe pay for delivery, which is different. The shipping would be from the origin to the store. Say you're in a grocery store, and then maybe you're calling, getting your groceries over the internet. So now they have to package it up, put it in somebody's car, and drive it out to your house. It's kind of a big thing now, or was at least for a while. They have to add that cost on. Now they have to also add on what it costs them to pay that person. They're paying by the hour to make that driving, the cost of the gas for that driving, and the maintenance of that car, which if you spread out over time is actually quite low. So they're not going to charge you the whole cost generally. Well, the whole cost that's actually coming out is part of yours. So what I'm saying is the balance of something may seem very out of balance, but when you take in all of the other things, it is in balance. I hope you see that. So when it says this word for stone, that's used of what I just said about adding all those other prices. That's the stone. Okay, so your balances will be righteous. Your stone, that which equalizes, that which balances, will be righteous. In other words, you're not going to take that lead weight or that stone, because early on they weren't using lead weights, they were using stones. And if you're getting, you can get two stones that are exactly the same size and shape, and one of them weighs a lot and one of them weighs very little, right? Because you could cheat somebody that way because of the density of the stone. So whatever it is, you have to make sure that all of those costs involved are real costs, and that you haven't just jacked up the price just because you can, because that's a bad thing. Anyway, so you've got will be righteous. Your measures righteous. Your measures righteous they will be. Your measures will be righteous. They will be righteous. And he says, I am Yahweh your God, who made you leave Egypt. Oh, jeepers. I thought I had a whole lot more time. I'm going to have to rush through this. Oh, no. We started late. Okay. I have enough time to get through this last one. And what? Yeah, I've got plenty of time for that. So then this thing winds up with this is the last verse, right? There's 37 of them. Yeah. So very literally in English, and guard you all ordinance my, and all judgments my, and do them with them, I, Yahweh. So do the righteousness. Who's the them? The proselyte, remember? So we have shamartem. And we haven't had this word in a while, but this is to keep, to guard, to watch. In a narrow sense, it's of a man tending to a garden. And what's a gardener do? Well, before the garden even gets started, he's tilling up the ground. He's getting rid of the weeds. He's making the soil better by maybe putting some uh, what's that stuff you put in the soil that fertilizer. I didn't want to say cow poop. Fertilizer, making it better. And then he is going to put his little seeds in there. And then he's going to have to put some water on it. He's going to have to keep the water up. And over time, the weeds are going to come back. He's got to pluck those weeds out. And over time, some of the leaves are going to start to die. And he's going to need to pluck away that. This is the whole idea of gardening. This is the hands-on thing. This is you don't just, throw some seed out in your backyard and walk away and hope that you have a harvest at the end of the year, right? And what are we going to guard? It says, et kol hu kotai, all of my ordinances. That which is established or defined. So that's going to cover all the laws. Spoken always, it says of a single law or ordinance, which is a nonsensical thing to say. That's somebody who doesn't get it. Law of heaven and nature. Oh, good Lord. That should never be found. The word nature should never be found in a Jewish document. There is no such thing as nature in Judaism. Everything was created by design. Nothing morphed, nothing evolved. No, nothing evolves. Everything goes in circles. Everything tends to repeat itself. Everything. The planet turns. The sun coming up and going down is a result of the planet turning. It's turning this way as it's turning in a bigger circle, right? The seasons, they turn. Winter, spring, summer, fall, winter, spring, summer, fall, winter, spring, summer, fall. Somebody's born, they get old, they die. Somebody else is born, they get old, they die. They're born, they get old, they die. They're born, they get old, they die. Everything goes in circles. Nothing evolves. When they tell you, oh yeah, well, this human evolved from this monkey. Because, how do you know? Well, because 95% of the DNA in a gorilla is exactly like the DNA in a human. You know what? You could probably say the same thing about a cow, a horse, a bird, maybe not a grasshopper, but who knows? No, everything cycles, nothing evolves because it was designed. There is no nature. There are no laws of nature. If you jump out of an airplane at, say, 15,000 feet without a parachute, you're going to find out that God made a law that says there's this thing called gravity, and if you don't have a parachute, you're going to splatter when you land. That's not a law of nature. That's a law of God because he designed it. All right. Anyway, so you're going to guard all of these ordinances, which, like I said, includes all of the law. Then it says ve'et kol, and all mishpatai, all of God's judgment. Not everything is law in the law, right? Some of it is you're not supposed to, like in the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not kill is how you hear it in English. That's not how it's moot. Shedding innocent blood, killing somebody. Yes, it is, but the image here is the shedding of innocent blood. So that's murder. If you're going to say thou shalt not, it should be thou shalt not commit murder. It should not be thou shalt not kill. You have to kill animals to have sacrifices. God's not stupid. He's not schizophrenic. He's not saying, dang, I didn't think about that. That's not happening with God. If there's conflict, it wasn't God, it was some translator, right? So thou shalt not commit murder. Shedding of innocent blood is murder, which is why some of the judgments are, well, an accident and there was no negligence involved. The accident didn't come about because you did something stupid. You know, there's these different levels, and I'm not a lawyer, so I may not get it exactly right, may be it completely wrong. I don't know. But murder, they say, well, there's the premeditated. That's murder. If they're, hang on, I got to press a button here. Sorry, I was paying attention. The judgments come in where if it's premeditated, that's shedding of innocent blood. That's murder. Then there's innocent blood that was in the heat of passion. Walks, he finds out that finds his best friend and his doing something that they should not be doing. In a fit of rage, he kills his wife. Anyway, that's from the movie way back when, Clint Eastwood movie. So he commits murder. And they call that, I think, second-degree murder. And so the punishment's a little lower because it just happened in the heat of a moment. Or you shed innocent blood because you're driving and maybe you hit a slick spot and then you hit somebody else, maybe a pedestrian or another car, and somebody died. Then God is, the judgment is, well, no, that's not premeditated. It's truly an accident. If on the other hand, you're driving down the road and you're texting somebody and you hit a pedestrian and kill them, that is murder, right? So those are the judgment parts of the law where those separations are being made out to cover things like when it's a total accident, or say let's say you're a person who built an apartment complex and you're cheesy cheap and want to just make money and you don't care about your people. You have railing put up that are not adequate to the job, and somebody falls, from their balcony because the railing wasn't strong enough. Well, that's negligence. That's negligent homicide, I think. Again, I'm not an attorney, but I think you get the idea of what I'm trying to say. Those are the judgments as opposed to the law. All right, then we have ve'asitem, to do them, otam aniyave. Okay, so our translation, I'm looking for my timer. You will guard all of my ordinances and all of my judgments. Again, the ordinances cover the law. That may not be true of the word ordinance in American law, but it's definitely true of this word in Hebrew. So you will guard all of my ordinances and all of my judgments. You will execute them. You will do them. I am Yahweh, God says. And he closes out this chapter. So that's as far as we can get today. Next week, I don't think we're going to be on the law next week. I've got something I'm really wanting to talk about, and I think it's about ready to go. So we'll probably be doing something different next week, but then at some point we'll get back into the law. Shalom v'shalom, everybody.
The blessing, Be'ivrit. Yevarecha Yahweh beyish merecha. Ya'er Yahweh panai v'lecha vihunecha. Yisa Yahweh panai v'lecha v'yasim lecha shalom. And in English, may Yahweh cause you to lie down so that you may rest. May he touch and caress you. May he prepare you for what is ahead. May he watch over you. May he keep you from harm. May he cause goodness to grow in you and take away the bad. May he arrange your life and cause you to flourish. May he cheer you up and gladden your heart. May he cause his light to shine through you. May he show you tenderness, favor, and love in his presence. May he show you kindness and be delicate towards you. May he show you his generosity, mercy, compassion, and desire for you as it comes forth from the depths of his soul. May he lift you out of your pit and deliver you from the things that hold you prisoner. May he draw you to his chest and cast his eyes on yours. May he show you his love and desire for you as he cradles you in his arms. May he bear your punishment and pardon you of your sin. May he take you for his bride. May he establish a foundation in you. May he place his name on your heart and mind and make your body his temple. May you be his treasure. May you always be on his mind. May he draw you near and comfort you when you are afraid. May he assure you there is nothing to fear because he is with you. May you and all that concerns you be at peace because he is your friend. Amen.